just for a baseline for this conversation, I always tell this story because I think it's a really invaluable story. Years ago, Ryan Schneider, when he left Capital One, Ryan Schneider's our CEO, when he left Capital One to come to us, he came from financial services. So one of the things that I respected that he did that I thought made sense is, put a team of researchers together to do a deep dive on the real estate industry. And to figure out like kind of the direction that we're going to go in as Coldwell Banker, as Realogy, as One Realogy. What he did was after he put this presentation together, he went around and did, a show, to the top managers and explained kind of, here is the industry as a whole. And so it was maybe like a 4-hour thing. I mean, it was a long presentation. And there were several different points that kind of stood out to me. But in my entire life, I've been, in real estate for 15 years. Managing for the past 10, I had never seen such a deep dive into the industry, not Coldwell Banker, not Realogy, but just industry wide. And what I found that was really cool is he talked about where splits are I think it was from 1970 until today, and I want to say this was 4 years ago, give or take. So if you think about, and he looked at it from two different perspectives. The first perspective was retained dollar. And you can imagine what the retained dollar looked like in 1970 compared to today. I mean, it was here, and then it was just a straight line down, from whatever it was. We were retaining, 54% or 56% back then. Now, we're 30 to 20% range. So then he asked the audience. He said, "So what does this mean for agents?" And everybody was like, "It means they're making more money," and they're like screaming out like stuff along those lines. And he said, interesting. And so he flips the slide and it has exactly what you would expect, which was the inverse. Like, the agents are now making the difference that brokers were making. And he says, but you're wrong in saying that agents are making more money. He said, you would look at this and you would think that that's true. He said, but one of the things that our industry as a whole has not paid attention to are the agent costs. Right. And what we don't look at is we think that because our splits are higher, industry wide, our splits are higher, that agents are making more money. But the reality is there's so many third parties, like, yes, we know of the Zillows of the world, but like we could also talk about, professional photography. We could also talk about all these different things that like professional marketing, like branding for an agent. And what he said at the time is he said, we're not just going to be competitive on splits, and we're not just going to be competitive in that world. We have to be competitive in that world, obviously. But one of the things we're going to try to do is focus in on how to give agents tools to save them money and save them time. Right. And that's always the starting point. One of the stories that I tell when I sit down with an agent, because I feel like it gets them to click in their mind that this is not just a conversation about split. It's a conversation about split because split's important. And obviously, we do TARP and we do all these things, but it's also about like, what can we do to help them from a tool, services, and cost perspective, and also a time perspective, which is the perfect tee up for me to get into desk. Okay. And that's exactly where I go with this is like, okay, like now I get them to understand, like for the last 4 years, what I think that Coldwell Banker has done a masterful job with is creating tools and systems that help put more money in your pocket while giving you more time in your schedule and not costing you so much more. And in many cases, we're saving you on expenses. So I'm gonna screen share if you give me 1 second.
Yeah, while you're doing that, I think you've captured the most important part of our value proposition is that you will make more money and your professional growth will be stronger and your career will be more illustrious and more profitable. And it's not as easy to explain that as it is to say you're going to get a 99.9% split, right? Our competitors who are out there offering a conversation like that is pretty easy and pretty quick. And the second part of that sentence is, and now you're on your own. So don't ask me for much help because my job is only to get the next one of you to join us. There's nothing here for you because you're making all the money.
Yeah. So, I mean, to that point real quick, one of the things I always say is if costs were the same, if Coldwell Banker was charging you what every other brokerage was charging you, who would you rather be with? And I have never had anybody tell me they would rather be with that other company, whatever the other company is. So, we know there's a value to the Coldwell Banker name. And if you ever get an agent, there's two kind of directions I go on this. If I ever get an agent that's really stubborn, that's unwilling to, define that we do have value with our name and who we are, then in some cases I just end the conversation. Because clearly, like, they have no interest in being with us. So, like, why am I going to tell them all of the tools and services and all of that stuff if I know that these people are just adamant that there's no value here? The other way that I go, and I would say I kind of put them out of order. One of the things that I would say is, like, okay, so we don't have any value to you, but I'm curious, like, what about to your clients? Because it's very interesting to hear when their face changes, because it's like, as a broker, like, I don't need a broker, I don't need this, but do your clients see a value in going with a big brand, like going with a name like us? And then it kind of gets them to shift a little bit, and they realize, like, ultimately, they're working for clients. So if their clients care about that, then they should care about that too.